So there's this business that roughly 95% of the people who start one are still running 5 years later. 90% of its customers come back again and again. It doesn't care if the stock market crashes. It doesn't care if there's a pandemic. It doesn't care if we're in a recession, a boom, or somewhere confusingly in between. And you've almost certainly walked past one this week without giving it a single thought. I'm talking about the humble laundromat. The place with the fluorescent lights, the hum of 40 machines, and that one guy who's clearly been watching the same dryer spin for 40 minutes like it owes him money. Today, we're going to break down the actual economics of owning a laundromat. Not the dreamy, passive income. Sit on a beach, let the quarters roll in version you've seen on some Finance Bros channel. The real version, the one with water bills and broken machines, and the surprisingly beautiful math that makes this 90-year-old business model refuse to die. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how these places make money, how much money, what can go horribly wrong, and whether that suspiciously quiet laundromat on the corner is a gold mine or a money pit. Let's get into it. First, let's talk about why anyone would want to own one of these in the first place, because on the surface, it sounds deeply unglamorous. Nobody grows up dreaming of owning a room full of washing machines. But here's the pitch, and it's genuinely a good one. Laundry is what economists would call non-discretionary. That's a fancy way of saying people need clean clothes whether they're rich or broke. When the economy tanks, you cancel Netflix, you skip the vacation, you stop buying the fancy coffee, but you do not stop washing your clothes. In fact, something interesting happens during downturns. People who were paying for a wash and fold service or thinking about buying their own washer and dryer suddenly can't justify the expense, so they trade down to the laundromat, which means this is one of the rare businesses that can actually get busier when times get tough. There's real history behind this. The American laundry industry basically took shape during the Great Depression, and it's been quietly humming along ever since. During COVID, when nearly every other storefront business was getting flattened, laundromats were declared essential and stayed open. Some owners even started accepting EBT and welfare benefit cards, because for a lot of people, that laundromat was not optional. It was survival infrastructure. So you've got recession resistance. You've also got what's called a fast payment cycle. Now, this sounds boring, but it's actually one of the most important things about the entire business. Most small businesses die from cash flow problems. You do the work, you send an invoice, and then you wait 30, 60, 90 days praying the client actually pays you. A laundromat has none of that drama. The customer pays before the machine even starts. There's no invoicing, no billing, no accounts receivable, no chasing anyone down. The money is in the machine before the water is even warm. For a small business, that's a massive structural advantage. And then there's the reputation for being nearly passive. The idea being, you set up the machines, customers do all the actual work themselves, and you just swing by to collect the money. We're going to seriously complicate that fantasy in a few minutes, but the kernel of truth is real. A self-service laundromat can run with very few employees, sometimes zero, which is wildly different from a restaurant where you're managing a dozen people who all want to quit on a Friday night. Okay, enough vibes. Let's talk numbers, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting. How does a laundromat actually make money? There's a formula that every single person in this industry lives and dies by. And once you see it, you'll never look at a wall of washing machines the same way again. Here it is. Number of machines times the price per wash, times something called turns, times the number of days in the month. Let's unpack that word turns, because it's the secret heartbeat of the whole business. A turn is simply how many times a single machine gets used in one day. If one washer runs 3 loads in a day, that's 3 turns. The magic benchmark that everyone in the industry uses is roughly 3 turns per day. If your machines are turning 3 times a day, you have a healthy, functioning laundromat. If they're turning once or twice, you're in trouble. If they're turning 4, 5, 6 times, you've struck oil. Let me make this concrete. Say you've got a store with 40 washing machines. Let's use a blended average vend price of around $5 a wash. At 3 turns a day, that's 40 machines times $5 times 3 turns, which is $600 a day just from the washers. Over a 30-day month, that's $18,000. And that's before we even count the dryers, which run on a separate meter and add their own stream of income on top. Now here's why the industry obsesses over turns, and this is the part I want you to really absorb. Because your costs are mostly fixed, every additional turn is almost pure profit. Watch this. Your rent is the same whether the machines run once a day or 5 times a day. So if you can nudge those machines from 2 turns to 3 turns, you're not increasing your revenue by 50%. You're increasing your profit by way more than that, because the extra revenue lands on top of costs you were already paying. The flip side is brutal. Industry analysts point out that in a 40-washer store, losing just one single turn per day can cost you over $5,000 a month. That's more than $60,000 a year evaporating, just because your machines are sitting idle one extra cycle each day. This is why the difference between a great laundromat and a failing one in the exact same neighborhood with the exact same equipment can be enormous. It all comes down to how often those drums are actually spinning. And there's a lovely little lever hiding in this math. Because there are so many machines, tiny price changes get multiplied enormously. Bump your wash price by just 25 cents in that 40-washer store running 5 turns a day, and you've added around $1,500 a month, roughly $18,000 a year. From a change so small, most customers won't even notice it. When people say laundromats have pricing power, this is what they mean. So that's the revenue side. Now let's talk about the thing that keeps laundromat owners up at night. The utilities. Here's the uncomfortable truth about this business. You are fundamentally in the business of buying water, gas, and electricity and reselling them in the form of clean clothes. Utilities are far and away the biggest ongoing headache. In a typical self-service laundromat, utilities eat up somewhere between 20 and 35% of your gross revenue. Let that sink in. Before you've paid rent, before insurance, before a single repair, roughly a quarter to a third of every dollar is already spoken for by the utility company. And water is the sneaky one because you actually pay for it twice. You pay for the clean water coming in, and then you pay again for the wastewater going out to be treated. A single large washer can gulp down 25 to 40 gallons in one cycle, and you've got dozens of them running hundreds of cycles a day. Those gallons add up into thousands of dollars a month fast. This is why you hear so much about high-efficiency machines. And it's not just eco-friendly marketing. Modern high-efficiency washers use something like 45% less water than the old clunkers. When water is one of your 2 biggest expenses, cutting its usage nearly in half doesn't just help the planet, it directly fattens your profit margin. And the machines often pay for themselves in a couple of years just on the savings. There's actually a rule of thumb owners use. If you've got newer machines, your utility bill should run around 15% of your gross income. If it's creeping 20% or higher, either your machines are old and wasteful, or something is literally broken, a leaking machine, or a dryer with a clogged vent running way too long. And it's quietly draining your profits. Now let's stack up all the costs and see what's actually left over at the end of the day. You've got your utilities, that big 20 to 30-something% chunk. You've got rent, which is your largest fixed cost, and the healthy target is to keep it under 25% of your revenue. Once rent climbs past 30%, your profitability starts getting crushed. Then there's maintenance and repairs, because these machines take an absolute beating from constant use, and they will break, usually at the worst possible time. There's insurance, there's the water heater keeping all that hot water flowing. And if you're running an attended store with staff, there's payroll, which for a full-service operation can become your single biggest line item. Add all that up, and a well-run laundromat typically spends somewhere between 65 and 80% of its revenue on total operating costs, which leaves a net profit margin in the range of 20 to 35%. And for the self-service model, that's a genuinely strong margin. It's one of the reasons this boring business gets so much love from investors who actually know what they're looking at. So what does that mean in real dollars? The numbers vary wildly by size and location, but a typical single laundromat pulls in somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000 a year in gross revenue. Apply those margins, and a well-managed store might net its owner anywhere from around $50,000 to over $200,000 a year in actual profit. On the return on investment side, laundromats tend to deliver somewhere in the 20 to 35% range, which is the kind of number that makes real estate investors a little jealous. Which brings us to the big question. If this business is so resilient, so recession-proof, so profitable, why isn't everyone doing it? Why do so many laundromats look like sad, flickering caves of despair? And this is the part the get-rich-quick crowd conveniently skips. Let's start with the myth of passive income, because it's the biggest trap. Yes, in theory, the machines run themselves, but every single successful owner interviewed about this says the same thing. It is not passive, especially not at the start. In the early stages, you're the one fixing machines. You're the one dealing with the flooded floor at 11 p.m. You're the one figuring out why turns are low and what to do about it. There's a whole grim nickname in the industry for what happens when an owner treats it as truly hands-off. They're called zombiemats. Dim, dirty, half the machine's broken, no marketing, no systems, no plan beyond hoping somebody wanders in. They generate just barely enough to keep the lights on while the equipment slowly dies and the lease runs out, and then the whole thing becomes basically unsellable. The passive dream is exactly how you create a zombiemat. Then there's the upfront cost, which is not small. Buying an existing laundromat typically runs somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000. Building a brand new one from scratch can run from a couple $100,000 all the way past $1 million once you factor in the specialized plumbing, the electrical upgrades to handle all that equipment, the machines themselves, and the build-out. This is a business with a serious barrier to entry. That barrier is also your friend once you're in, because it keeps casual competition out. But you've got to clear it first. Maintenance is a genuine grind. Owners literally joke that they spend more time fixing machines than doing anything else. Every broken machine is a machine that isn't turning. And remember what we said about turns. Every idle machine is money walking out the door. There's also security to think about, especially for stores open 24 hours or in rougher areas. And there's the ever-present risk of a bad lease. You can do everything else right, but if you sign a lease with aggressive rent increases baked in, or a short term with no renewal option, your landlord can quietly strangle the whole business a few years down the line. And location isn't just important, it's basically everything. The ideal laundromat sits right in the middle of its customers. Because get this, around 87% of laundromat customers live within a single mile of the store. Your core customers are renters, students, and working families, people who don't have a washer and dryer at home. Put your store in the wrong spot, chasing cheap rent instead of the right demographics, and no amount of clever pricing will save you. Pick based on rent instead of people, and you've sabotaged yourself before you've washed a single sock. Oh, and I have to address it, because you're all thinking it. The money laundering thing. Yes, the term money laundering really does have roots in cash-heavy businesses like this, where it was historically easy to mix dirty money in with legitimate income. But in the real modern world, this is a terrible idea and a great way to meet the IRS up close. And honestly, the industry is moving away from cash entirely. Card and app-based payment systems are taking over, partly because stores that accept cards actually make 17 to 22% more than coin-only ones. And partly because cards mean way fewer machine repairs and no coins to physically haul to the bank. So the coin-clinking mob movie image is fading fast. Today's laundromat is increasingly a tech-forward, app-driven storefront. So where does that leave us? Let me pull this all together. The laundromat is one of the most quietly brilliant business models in America, precisely because it's boring. It sells a non-negotiable human need. It gets paid up front in full. Its costs are mostly predictable. It shrugs off recessions. And thanks to that beautiful turns times price times machines math, small improvements in how often those drums spin, or tiny bumps in price, can produce outsized jumps in profit. but it is absolutely not free money. The businesses that thrive are the ones where an owner actually pays attention, keeps the place clean and safe, keeps the machines running so they never miss a turn, watches those utility ratios like a hawk, and treats it like the real business it is. The ones that fail are the ones bought by someone who believed the passive income fairy tale and let the whole thing rot into a zombie mat. So the next time you walk past that laundromat on the corner, take a second look. Notice how many machines are actually running. Notice whether it's clean, whether it's busy, whether there's a card reader on the wall. Because you're not just looking at a room full of washing machines, you're looking at a formula. Machines times price, times turns, times days. And depending on how well someone's running that formula, you might be looking at a struggling little money pit or a genuine, humming, recession-proof gold mine hiding in plain sight. If you found this breakdown useful and you want more deep dives into the surprisingly fascinating economics of boring businesses, stick around. There are a lot more of these hiding out there than you'd think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.